Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mark Anthony's Music Picks. Today is episode 164, and before I get started on today's episode, I just wanted to make a note that episode 163 had a technical issue. I temporarily moved it to unlisted status, and I'm just waiting to see if I can fix it via YouTube or if I have to go back into my editing software and repost that. So I will make that available at some point. For episode 164, I want to focus on a person that I haven't talked about a lot, but that I have a ton of respect for, and that is Steve Lawler. For whatever reason, Steve Lawler has not been mentioned very many times, if at all, on this channel, which is a shame because he was somebody that I really respected, especially in the early years of my DJing career when Steve's career was arguably at its peak. I would say in the early to mid 2000s. I think I caught on to Steve around 2004, 2005. So I missed the whole Lights Out and Dark Drums era. For whatever reason, I just wasn't getting exposure to it. Dark Drums, I think, came out in 1999 or maybe 2000, right around that time. And the Lights Out series was from, I think, 2003 to maybe 2005. I think he was putting one out about approximately every year, or maybe like a year and a quarter in between those. I was into a lot of tribal house. I was listening to Tenaglia at the time. And Tenaglia, if you're a Steve Lawler fan, you know that Tenaglia was a big influence on Steve Lawler. So I guess it's just kind of surprising to me that I missed the boat, but I think it had to do with the types of venues that I was going to back then. I was getting more exposure to like the New Jersey and the Philly cheese, the cheese tribal. I should be careful saying that, but along the lines of like Twisted and the bigger labels that were, who else was dominating out of New York at that time? I can't think of another one off the top of my head, but like more of like the circuit labels were really dominating what was being played down in Philly, and I just didn't get exposure to Steve's sound, which was generally emanating from Great Britain at that point. Steve, he took off in Great Britain, but if you want to learn a lot about Steve, go back and watch the documentary that I'm going to link down below in the description. Steve is one of those DJs that you just have to respect because he came up from nothing, not from like an impoverished family or anything like that, but he started his career and built it up organically. And he did it by putting out mixed compilations, grinding it out at tough gigs and working tough hours. And if you watch the documentary, you can see how much he struggled, how many times he tried different ways of getting himself promoted and trying to like expand his name and get his name out there, and all the times that he was shot down and had failures. And eventually, the thing that I like about the most about his story is that eventually he broke through. He got the right breaks. He eventually ended up hooking up with the right club owners that gave him a residency, and that's when he started to blow up. But for whatever reason, what he was doing in Great Britain just wasn't coming over into the States, or at least it wasn't coming into my purview. So I just didn't really catch on to him until he had already kind of like exited the genre that I was a big fan of, like I said, the tribal. Now, this episode is not going to be focused on Dark Drums or Lights Out. The era that I'm going to focus on is the era that I spent the most time with Steve Lawler's mixes and his original tracks, and that I took the most influence from Steve, and that is 2005 to 2006. Now, 2005 and 6 were not big years for tribal. You could say that artists like Chus and Ceballos and Stereo Productions were still rocking it hard at that point. They certainly were. But while tribal was on the way down, there was a new, I guess, a phase, a craze, whatever you want to call it. And I call it electro tech. If you use the word electro in the presence of people that are from Detroit, they're going to be thinking of tracks like Cybotron's Clear, right? That's real electro. Or if you mention it around anybody that knows convection, right, they're going to be thinking of that ERP, that classic 132, 133 beats per minute ERP convection sound. electro also had sort of like I guess a bastard cousin, which was like the cheesy electro that really took over in 2005, and it was more like commercial leaning. It was very popular at daytime parties because it was kind of a friendlier sound. And to me, I mean, I thought it was just a bad genre. Oh, 2005 electro records, maybe 1 out of 100 of them are still good at this point. I'm not saying that they were all bad. There's definitely a few classics that came out then, but that was a really, really rough year for dance music. If you were buying '05 electro vinyl, I feel sorry for you. You probably threw it all in the trash, and rightfully so. But when electro started to fuse with tech house, that's when the electro tech genre was born. And the label that comes to mind that I guess most signifies that is the Electribe record label that was run by, I believe, Mark O'Toole. Or you could look at the Mauritius label with tracks like Chris Source, Hugs and Kisses. That was like the epitome of the electro tech sound, and Steve grabbed onto that sound. Steve Lawler grabbed onto it, and for a year or two he was just knocking out really crazy mixes that I think are still even good now. And some of the tracks that I learned about in those mixes are what this episode is about. That's why I titled it Steve Lawler Influence. I'm actually not going to talk about any of Steve Lawler's productions. I might save that for another episode down the road. This is all going to be tracks that I learned about via Steve Lawler in 2005 and 2006 via either seeing him live or listening to his mixes that he was putting out mixes like every month or two at that point. So there was just a steady stream of really, really tight Lawler mixes coming out. So for this episode, I have 5 records for you, and I hope you enjoy them. These are records that have been really special to me, and the fact that they've stayed on my shelves through all of the iterations and purges that I've done over my collection over the years, I think it's a testament to how good these tracks are. My first pick for you came from a 2006 mix that Steve Lawler did. It was called Contact FM. I went back. I had the original file for the mix at some point on CD, and I was listening to it on the CD player in my car back in the day. That CD player and the CD are long gone. I was able to eventually Google search the mix, and I found the track list for it, but I can't actually find the download. So if anybody happens to have that, please give me a shout down in the comments below. I would love to get a copy of it and listen to it again. But that aside, the Contact FM mix was memorable to me because it opened up with this record right here. This is the Juicy Pekka. I will not go near that artist name. I'm sure it's a deliberate play on words. This is Juicy Pekka, and he's a Finnish an artist from Finland that makes electrotech, or was making electrotech back then. I went and looked at Juicy's catalog, and I saw that the last record that he released was in 2015, so I think he's defunct at this point. He's probably retired. But this was my favorite Juicy record of all time. It's called the Dead Serious EP, and the track that I'm featuring for you on here is called Dead Serious. It's on the A1, I believe. And this is on Juicy's record label, which is called Frozen North. My experience with this was originally hearing it in the Contact FM mix. It was the first mix. Steve did like a volume fade right into it, and that bass line that you'll hear in the sample that I give you here is the whole reason to own this record. It is just an absolute beast of a bass line. The track, for the most part, it's like most other tech house tracks. I think it's maybe 7 or 8 minutes long. The elements that you hear in the first 2 to 3 minutes are the same elements that you're going to hear in the last 2 minutes. So there's not much of an evolution going on there, but it's okay because the entire track centers around the deepness and just the nasty depth of that bass line. I played during my short-lived DJ career, I had a chance to play Dead Serious at a warehouse party. I remember specifically that I had the track Radio Slave Wheeze, which I'll give you a picture of here. I had Weaves playing, and during Weaves, there's a break where it goes into like kind of like a treble-ish breakdown with no bass, and I had Juicy's Dead Serious queued up, and I just did a fader slam and just dropped the bass line, and I got a great response from the crowd, and that kind of sealed it because it was like I saw talent in that track before I had a chance to play it. I was like, I think this will go down well, and when I heard confirmation from the crowd that night, it just sealed the deal. The next track that I want to discuss with you is one that is really near and dear to my heart. I mean, who could not love M.A.M.P's Reg, right? This is the epitome of the Innervisions label. This is the epitome of their sound. To me, it never got any better than this. I have mixed feelings about the early Innervisions catalog, even to this point. I think a lot of people might have nostalgic memories around, let's say, maybe the first 10 or 15 releases. They're musically good, but a lot of, outside of Reg, a lot of those tracks to me haven't really aged necessarily very well. The Innervisions tends to be emo house, as I've seen it labeled, and I think that's a great way to put it. Innervisions tends to, outside of Reg, have a softness or a mushiness to it that it doesn't have enough of an edge. There's just something like a little bit too nice about it. And I guess over the span of the entire catalog, there's a few sprinkled in here and there that have some legit darkness to them, Reg being one of them. But there's also a lot of tracks that are just kind of bizarre and almost bordering on like electronic elevator music in their theme. I mean, not in their overall sound, but there's just something slightly too nice about them. M.A. Reg, though, man, I think people might hate on Reg because of how popular it is and how many times it got played. I mean, I understand that, but if you step back from this, if you don't listen to it for a while and then you come back and drop the needle on Reg, you can't deny that this track is a pure bomb. In the club, Reg is thunder, man. There's a distorted guitar lead that creates a buildup in the second, maybe like 2/3 of the way into the track. And that is one of the most epic buildups that I've ever heard in any record. When you turn the volume up in that, it's sonic perfection. And to hear that played out on a system, man, that will absolutely blow your mind at a high volume. So giving massive respect where respect is due. I love all the remixes of Reg. I have the 100 Birds remix. There's another one that's not coming to mind right now that I also have, but like any version that has the original melody and a semblance of that really sick bass line, that little 2 or 3 note bass line that's so clever and so simple yet so effective, man, Reg is unstoppable. pick for you is a record that I actually heard when I got to see Steve Lawler live. The only time I got to see Steve live was once at Crowbar back in 2006, and that was one of my favorite club nights of all time. I was with good friends. There were other friends of friends that came, and we had like a nice little entourage going on the dance floor. I remember when I got to the club, DJ3, who is just an absolute beast behind the decks. I love that guy. He was opening, and there might have been 10 people on the entire main floor. So my friend and I had the dance floor to ourselves, and we were just hanging out, vibing. People didn't really come in for like another hour, hour and a half, but three's set, he doesn't care, man. That guy just lays down beats like it's his job. Interesting aside about DJ3, he's one of the few DJs that got famous without really being a producer. I think he does have like a very short list of productions that he's ever released, but somehow without, like, everybody knows that the key ingredient to becoming a successful DJ is to also be a producer. So for Three to do it without really producing, it's like he must have really been putting in his time and probably killed it with track selection and programming. He probably just got to be such a reliable name that people know they can go and see him anytime, anywhere, and he's going to bring the goods. So anyways, that night at Crowbar, we ended up staying till the end, and one of the last tracks that I remember, it was probably around 5 or 6 in the morning, that the dance floor had already peaked and was starting to thin out. My friend and I decided to do a walk around the upper deck of Crowbar, where all that like weird box seating was that they had in the back. And as we were doing that slow walk around there, this track was playing here. It was Joe T. Vanelli's Get It On, and this is Joe's dubby mix. It's Summer of Love. It's like Get It On, Summer of Love, in parentheses, Joe's dubby mix. This is, to me, a weird record. First of all, Royal Flush is like kind of a tacky label. So this record's almost like too legit for me to be on Royal Flush. And Joe T. Vanelli, you would think with a name like that, I mean, it just sounds like an American name, doesn't it? I mean, it sounds like the guy would be from New York. I don't know why, but that's where like I thought he would be from. And then when I went and looked him up on Discogs, it's actually just an alias for a guy named Giuseppe that is from Italy and has been producing for a long time. This record, it's strange. It's very hard for me to pin down. It has the legitimacy of like a classic Dane Tenaglia remix that might have came out in like 2001 or 2002. Like it sounds kind of like Tenaglia, and the vocalist Rochelle Fleming, I mean, she absolutely crushes it on this. If you listen to the segment that I've captured here in the sample, I mean, that girl's singing her heart out. Joe, aka Giuseppe, crushing it with the drums. I mean, you've got a very strange arrangement. I'm gonna pull the record out so you can just look at it. There's a lot of stripes, and see that angle there? There's a lot of stripes and breakdowns in this track, and 11 minutes long. It's just an odd record. I mean, it fits in incredibly well in Crowbar, New York. It was perfect for that venue, but to be on Royal Flush by Joe T. Vanelli, like the whole thing is just like an odd combination to me. But what a wonderful record. I've held on to this and I would recommend it. I think this is still cheap. Go and get it. Check this out. Turn it up.
I need
I'm back on Ame again, and the reason I'm talking about Ame again is because Ame was really at their peak in the early 2000s, anywhere from '04 to maybe '07 was peak club Ame. They've still been releasing since then, but I don't know if they ever got back to the original status that Reg put them on. Here's a one that I actually just acquired recently. I've wanted this for years, and I was just waiting for an American copy to show up. And one day, one was finally listed for me that was in the right price range for me. This is Akabu's Future Bound, remixed by Ame. A little bit of a peculiar release because it has hundreds of owners, but it was only ever released as a promo. It's one of Ame's best remixes ever. I think most fans would agree that it's in Ame's top 5 tracks of all time. But why only a promo? I don't know. You can see right there. You can see right there. It says promotional copy. There is no non-promotional copy. It's like they did 1,000 of these and never did a quote unquote full release. I don't know how that happens. Maybe some kind of shortcoming or mix up at the record label. But what a nasty track, man. It fits into a set similar to Ame's Reg. I mean, you could probably play this, if not the next track, 1 or 2 tracks away from it, and the vibe would be right on par with it. I love the guy's voice in this. The guy's voice where he says "lost in sound." I mean, it's just so dramatic. The keys just have a very dark feeling, as if as if you're way in like the middle of a city, and it almost like it almost encompasses or encapsulates the sound or feeling of being really immersed in a nightclub, and that's why I love it. So check out Ame's remix of Future Bound. If you haven't heard it, you should definitely have it.
Lost in sound.
My fifth and final pick for you, again, another Ame remix, but hey, you can't argue with success. They were really bringing it back in '06. This was another Steve Lawler find that I found due to Steve, and it was featured in Steve Lawler's Wasted mix. Wasted is one that is a more popular mix that he did. It was, I believe, a promo that was put out around the time of Winter Music Conference, and this track was featured in it amongst many other gems. If you want like a really good track list to go through, if you want to find some great electro tech that still plays well, check out Steve Lawler's Wasted mix on YouTube or just Google it. Here, this is a remix of Rodamal. The track is called Insomnia. I don't know why it's called Insomnia, but it might be because the vocals that are in the track are they're kind of strange. It's weird. The track has an incredibly catchy vocal to it, where the girl's just repeating these chants, but each sentence or each statement doesn't really cohesively work with the one before it, and that might be how they got the title Insomnia. It's almost like when you're dreaming and you're having thoughts that are just, you can picture them, but then when you wake up from the dream and you try to explain them to somebody else, like you almost can't put words on it because it's such a goofy premise that's happening in your mind, but it's like your mind conjures it up. So maybe the person that wrote those lyrics was having trouble sleeping, or they were sleep deprived, and they came up with that. But absolute monster. This is another gem from the electro tech genre. I got to play this out at a Philly gig, and I had a couple of people walk up to the booth and ask me for the ID, which was pretty cool. Buzzin is the label that this was released on. That's Ben Watt's label. I always found Buzzin to be like a little bit of a sleeper label. You had to go through those tracks and really take your time listening to them. And there were more gems in there that you would realize. That I mean, there were some that were definitely worth passing over, but every once in a while, Ben put some serious gems out, and this is one of them. I think I only have 3 Buzzin records on my shelves, but this is definitely the best one. So check out Rodamal's Insomnia, remixed by M.A.M.P.
E se as luzes adormecem, é porque a variância chegou mesmo ao fim. Cede o vento ao teu passo, no compasso que há em ti. Preparas a tua glória, Find it, keep it, work it, share it. Find it, keep it, work it, spread it. Find it, keep it, work it, share it. Find it. Keep it, work it, spread it.
All right, this concludes my Steve Lawler influence episode. I hope you enjoyed these tracks. Every one of these tracks were brought to me by Steve, either by live mixes, like I said, or hearing him out live when I did go to see him that one time. So thank you, Steve, for all the wonderful track selections that you made over the years. I think you're a great DJ. I love that you do these interviews and you put yourself out there. You tell the truth. You tell your backstory. I think you did such a great job DJing, and it's cool if you're taking a rest at this point and you're starting to fade out of the scene. I don't blame you, man. You put in your work. But thank you so much, and I hope you get to watch this episode sometime. Take care.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for being my friend. Thanks for being around. Thanks for everything. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being my